Welcome to the Heidi Thorne Show. I'm your host, Heidi Thorne, and in this podcast, I share my real world self publishing and small business experience with you. So let's get started with today's show. Now, today we're going to talk about what comes after your book launch. I've noticed that a lot of authors get very excited about their book launch, and they do a lot of promotion and a lot of chatter online, and they're just really focused on the book launch, but then they don't really plan for anything after that. What they don't realize is that a lot of your sales of your books will be of what's called your backlist. Now, your backlist is any of the books that you've previously published that are about a year or more old. So they go off of what's called the front list, and that's a publishing term. I'm not even going to bother with it because we're talking about self-publishing. But your backlist is everything that you have previously published. And there's a lot of authors who they try and sell the last book by publishing a new book. So they're in constant new book publishing mode. And that's very stressful, and it can be a lot of investment because if you are hiring editors or graphic designers or printers or anything like that, it can get very expensive if you just keep trying to do new books. Now, what a lot of self-published authors also don't realize is that a lot of the big publishers, the big trade publishers, make a good chunk of their revenues from backlist titles. In other words, titles that are a year or more old. I've seen estimates anywhere from 25% up to over 70%. And it depends on who you talk to and what publisher you're talking about, but you can make a lot of money as a big house publisher by having these backlist titles. In fact, there are some publishing houses that will purchase the backlist of other publishing houses because they're that valuable. So I think it really emphasizes the point that even as self-published authors, we have to think about the long-term sales program for our titles. So, what does that mean? First of all, you need to be thinking about what you can do to keep your audience engaged over the long haul. And you want to keep them engaged because you will eventually have other books, but in the meantime, you're going to need to keep them always in your tribe and keep them interested. So some of the things you want to do to promote your currently published book, here's some things you can do. You can host a virtual Q&A on some aspect of your book. And that's very engaging. And if you're brave enough to do things like Instagram Live or Facebook Live, that can be very engaging for your readers because they can personally connect with you and really ask questions that they want to know. So a virtual Q&A is a good thing to do. Another thing to do would be to really monitor what's going on in the news and media And if there's a news story or a situation or an event that relates to something in your book or your topic, especially if it's nonfiction, you can use that as a springboard for maybe a blog post or a video or a podcast that relates to that news event, and then how it relates to things you write. So that can be very engaging as well. And one of the things too that you want to think about is advertising. Now, this is where a lot of authors start cringing, and I don't blame them. I advertise my backlist books all the time. I have it on a continuous advertising for my books on Amazon, and I use Amazon Marketing Services to advertise my backlist titles. And just to give you an idea of what backlist titles can do, my first book that I published in 2011 is still, several years later, still my top selling title. I have a couple others that I did a few years ago, and those are also selling too, but it's really like only maybe 2 or 3 titles that are really pulling the weight in terms of my revenues from my book. But if you are going to be using Amazon Marketing Services, there's a few things you have to be very aware of. First of all, the ad platform, AMS ad platform, is getting better and better and better over time. They have instituted a whole new ad interface. Before January of 2019, you kind of had to do a lot of guessing in terms of what your ad results really were, because they would give you lifetime results, but not results from the past quarter, or if you made any changes to your, it was just very difficult. So you kind of had to guess. But overall, I got really good ROI over the entire lifetime of my advertising. One thing that I have noticed though, since they've revamped the ad system, was that it's getting much more competitive over time. I'm not able to do the few cents a click. I've experimented with pumping up my advertising bids on there. It works very similar to Google AdWords, where you bid per click. And so I raised it up, and within 1 month or so, I had spent everything that I had spent in almost 2 years prior. So it was just crazy. So it's getting more competitive, and it's going to get more competitive over time. I don't know if you've noticed it, but on Amazon right now, you'll see ads for books and other products that they sell through Amazon, but you'll also see things advertised that would not typically be sold on Amazon, such as vehicles and home loans, insurance, and just a whole bunch of other things that typically Amazon wouldn't be selling, because advertising is one of the biggest chunks of Amazon. They're an advertising platform. They're a retail platform. They make a lot of money through their web services. So it is going to get more and more competitive over time, but I still think it represents a pretty good value. And I have a pretty good discussion about all of that in my course on self-publishing sales on Udemy, so you probably want to check that out if you want to do a deep dive into that topic. And then there's some people who have suggested that Facebook ads or Instagram ads are a good way to promote your books, and I'm going to disagree with that. I have experimented with it, and it has not done well, meaning that I ran the ads and I didn't see a corresponding bump in sales for the titles that I was promoting. And granted, I could have maybe spent more to do more of an experiment with it, but I just don't think that that's the best way to use Facebook and Instagram ads for books, especially your backlist titles. I think the better way to use Facebook and Instagram ads is to build your author brand. And we've talked about this over and over again. And it's really a way to build more fans for your books so that when you have another new title out, they're ready to buy that. And as you build your author platform and get more fans, your old books are new to your new fans. So that can also build your backlist sales. So I really want to encourage you to think beyond the book launch when you are thinking about your book marketing programs. So I hope you have found that helpful. And if you did, I would really appreciate it if you would wander over to iTunes and give the Heidi Thorne Show a nice rating and review. And while you're on iTunes, don't forget to subscribe to the Heidi Thorne Show so you don't miss an episode of this podcast. And if you like to listen on another platform, I'm on Stitcher and Podbean. I'm on your Alexa with the AnyPod skill. And if you like the video version, you can just subscribe to my Heidi Thorne YouTube channel and you will get notifications on all the videos that I place on YouTube. So you can check it out there. Now, my self-published books are available on Amazon. You just have to search for my name, Heidi Thorne, and my author page will come up. You go to my author page and everything is right there. Now, that includes my print books, ebooks, and audiobooks, but my audiobooks are also available on Audible and iTunes audiobooks. If you want to connect with me, my website is simply HeidiThorne.com, and I would really appreciate it if you would share the Heidi Thorne Show with your author friends on social media. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. I'll look forward to talking with you again in the next episode. In the meantime, have a great day.